Hello, in this broadcast, the program Time. In connection with the earthquake on Sakhalin, which was the cause of death of hundreds of people, today, by decision of the President of Russia, was declared a day of mourning. Ribbons of mourning with the state flags of the Russian Federation are in expressive contrast against the bright colors of the Moscow in its summer glory. The flags have been lowered over the Moscow Kremlin, the building of the State Duma, the Federative Council, and other institutions and organizations. In theaters and concert halls, entertaining functions have been replaced, and subjected to appropriate changes were programs of radio and television. Sakhalin is receiving many condolences from Muscovites. The Moscow City Administration is preparing in the near future to dispatch humanitarian aid to the earthquake victims in Neftegorsk. We know that we live in an era of great cataclysms, but it's so difficult to come to terms with the thought that our lives will be affected by turbulences similar to the monstrous Sakhalin catastrophe. Today in Neftegorsk, a funeral gathering was held and the first mass burial of the victims of the earthquake. In a common tomb, 26 people were buried. To come and say farewell to the victims were all who had a brief reprieve from the job to clear the rubble. In the recently reconstructed Cathedral of the Resurrection in southern Sakhalin, today a requiem was held and the state flags of Russia were lowered on all administrative buildings of the towns of the district. On airwaves, mournful music was played, and all daytime and evening entertaining functions have been cancelled. Meanwhile, the emergency rescue work continues, and even today hope is not lost of exhuming survivors from under the rubble, although voices are heard less frequently. An irreplaceable service to the rescuers is provided by Search Canine. One of them has to its credit, I wasn't able to get its name, but it's a purebred red setter. There are more than 10 saved lives. The dog is trained to react to a surviving human. Pulled out from under the rubble by the end of the day today were almost 700 people, more than 300 casualties. No one quotes the exact figure because it constantly changes. In certain sources of mass media, it was reported that the rescue work would be discontinued after 4 days, but that is not so. The debris will be cleared until the last bit. This is the decision of the State Commission and District Headquarters. Means and strength is sufficient for this. The problem remains water supply and housing. People mainly have to sleep near bonfires and in tents. Medications to ease the pain are in short supply and to alleviate trauma and shock. In Neftegorsk itself, there are 50 medics at work. Hundreds of specialists are fighting for the lives of the survivors of the disaster. Our special correspondent, Anton Vernitsky, returned last night from the site of the natural disaster. Around the clock, rescue work continues at the shattered town of Neftegorsk. As of today, of the 3,200 residents of the village prior to the earthquake, 649 survived. 500 bodies were exhumed from the rubble. Half of them have been identified because they perished in entire families. The region of the local city police has to identify bodies by documents and family photos found in the ruins. Survivors don't leave the village, still hoping to find their friends. 18 airplanes and 14 helicopters constantly transport those injured found in the rubble to the nearby village of Akhta and further to South Sakhalinsk and Khabarovsk. Environmentalists said that there are no environmental disasters as a result of the earthquake in Sakhalin. The leakage of oil and gas from pipelines is not observed, and about the further fate of the destroyed village of the old workers. Neftegorsk will definitely not be restored because it is not needed in such a quantity, 3,200 population, where one can accommodate only 120 people. It will be a smaller village. All of the people will be resettled. We've named 3 points: South Sakhalin, Akha, and Nortriki. Categorically refuting rumors of looting in Neftegorsk is the head of the internal affairs of the Sakhalin district, Major General of the militia Boris Labdovsky. Maintaining law and order in the affected village are almost 800 employees dispatched to the area of the subdivision of the island police. Access and egress to Neftegorsk for each individual is under control. The victims of the earthquake in Sakhalin continue to be brought to the Vladivostok hospitals. In Vladivostok today, the state flags have been lowered. Grief, compassion, and empathy overfill the hearts of the Far Eastern residents because here they continue to receive victims of the terrible earthquake on Sakhalin. The best specialists have already performed 30 of the most complicated operations. Doctors did another good deed. They meticulously compiled lists of all patients admitted to the Vladivostok hospitals and sent them to Sakhalin and informed relatives and friends because phone calls are coming from everywhere. Around the clock in the city, blood transfusion stations are operating. The RIM communications company is receiving packages for Neftegorsk voluntarily, and an account has been opened for victims of the earthquake where money is being received from foreign citizens. The local administration has decided to allot housing to all Neftegorsk victims hosted in Primorye. Khabarovsk also received victims of the earthquake of Neftegorsk. About 20 vehicles of medical first aid awaited yet another flight from Ahav, which just a few hours ago landed in the Khabarovsk airport. 18 more participants of the terrible tragedy, of them 6 are children, taken to our city. The medics had foreknowledge of the patients who were arriving and received them in full preparedness. The patients are mostly seriously injured, suffering from symptoms of crushed torsos with severe kidney malfunctioning, injuries to the lower and upper extremities. How can the Khabarovsk people help? Many are calling. Much is needed to treat these patients. Blood, plasma, solutions, that's what we need. 90% of the victims need kidney dialysis machines. The chairman of the Federative Council, Vladimir Shumeyka, has sent to the heads of the administrations and leaders of legislative assemblies of the subjects of the Federation a telegram in connection with the tragedy. He asks that local authorities announce in sources of mass media that accounts have been opened to transfer money. The numbers of the accounts: the ruble account is 311 32 339, Arcade Say, State Bank, State Sakhalin, as shown, the number 277004, the administration of the Sakhalin district. The hard currency accounts is through the Sotsbank of South Sakhalinsk. The correspondence account is 081204. The recipient is the Pacific Foreign Trade Bank. The account number is 76701-001. Boris Nikolaevich, now it's very difficult with transportation. Everything must be delivered. Equipment, 150 units of technology have already been delivered. They're operating, and we need more. But for this, we need enormous planes to deliver. Yet, we will provide them completely with personnel and equipment. But time goes on, and of course, for a person to endure underground is questionable. Is the control over the aid strict? Yes, very strict. We, for now, have not accepted foreign assistance because, in general, we have the resources to deal with it ourselves. An emergency session was held in the White House by Viktor Chernomyrdin, who interrupted his vacation because of the tragedy in Sakhalin. They spoke of the living. The dead will still be remembered when the time comes to make the basic conclusions. Today, emergency control is needed. Alexis Kovets, who headed the Interdepartmental Commission, has just returned from the site of the occurrence. According to his information, the overall area affected by the earthquake is 15,000 square kilometers. However, the main blow was dealt to a very small area, but where there were 22 5-story homes. 17 of them have been completely destroyed. From the almost 3,000 population, 781 escaped harm or were saved. That is the latest report. 445 bodies were exhumed. The rest are considered to be unaccounted for. Temperatures in Neftegorsk is +6 degrees Celsius, at night -3. Chances to reach the living are decreasing. The emergency rescue work is complicated by the remoteness of the village from the basic thoroughfares. At the same time, during the first 24 hours, already more than 1,000 people have arrived. Currently, 1,500. Emergency financing was provided. All forces of civil aviation and the railroads are involved. However, as the scientists said, who were also present at the meeting, danger hasn't passed yet. It was considered that until 1971, Sakhalin was not seismically volatile. However, lately the zone has become more active, and the science is inclined to expect a series of earthquakes in the entire region. In that connection, the Prime Minister issued instructions to hold an entire inspection of housing. According to him, on the island of 202 230,000 square meters of housing are not in buildings adapted for earthquakes and built with violations in construction. He also promised that all victims will be paid full compensation and that they will be provided housing. According to the latest reports, in Neftegorsk, exhumed from under the rubble are 924 people, including 94 children. 529 people are dead. That includes 60 children. This was reported to a correspondent of Interfax by a representative of the Ministry of Emergency Situations. During 4 days after Sakhalin trouble signal appeared on the maps, computers of the Ministry of Emergency Situations hourly are yielding statistics on the catastrophe. In the next days, rescuers plan to end the clearing of the rubble, and then the final list of the casualties in the vanished town will be known. Meanwhile, today from Moscow to Sakhalin, a group of specialists flew out to prevent the spread of epidemics in the disaster area. Considering the unfavorable forecast of scientists regarding the seismic condition in the region, the rescuers' missions clearly promise to be protracted. We're speaking of unfolding sufficient efforts there because the area is very remote and almost inaccessible, so that personnel would be equipped in the event of having to perform emergency measures in the event of a reoccurrence, up to mobilizing urgent response forces of the Central Disaster Relief Teams and those which we have access to in other regions. Our correspondent today interviewed the director of the Seismological Institute of the Russian Academy of Sciences, Gennady Sobolev. This earthquake was not predicted and was not expected. Chances of predicting it were lost because the monitoring system of seismic stations on Sakhalin last year in northern Sakhalin ceased to exist. It's known that Sakhalin is a volatile seismological area, and there were historically powerful earthquakes, but not such strong ones in the north. There is a geological vault which passes directly under Neftegorsk. Also, as you know, in that region, there is development of oil and gas sites, and there are cracks in the Earth's core. In this sense, of course, most likely the earthquake was tectonic, natural, but to a degree could have been precipitated by boring. Now the situation is alarming, because after such a strong earthquake, there were no recent strong repeat tremors. That means in the next week or two, there could be a very strong jolt of 7 to 8 points. After such a powerful earthquake, over the course of 1 or 2 years, the seismic activity will subside, there will be no more powerful jolts, and later it will be relatively calm. Today, the newspaper Arguments and Facts reports that by the year 2000, the government has planned to allot to the program of seismic observation 368 billion rubles. As their own personal tragedy, the plight of the Sakhalinians is received not only by all Russians, but residents of the CIS states who also had endured terrible blows of the underground disaster. More than a quarter century ago, early in the morning on the 26th of April 1966, a plight descended on Tashkent. A powerful earthquake in just seconds turned the center of the city into ruins. A powerful underground jolt destroyed more than 2 million square meters of housing. Thousands of people were homeless, but they didn't feel themselves defenseless before the natural catastrophe, because on the same day in Tashkent, humanitarian aid began to arrive, the best construction teams from the Soviet Union. By their hands, the city was reborn from the ashes. The terrible tragedy in the Sakhalin district was felt more in the hearts of the Tashkent residents. The government of the Republic of Uzbekistan decided to disperse $100,000 American for aid. Today, in one of the central banks, a special account is being opened to collect aid for all those who suffered as a result of this disaster. Ashkhabadians, not by hearsay or chronicles, know what an earthquake is. Meters of the complex seismological expedition of the Academy of Science of Turkmenistan and its 25 stations annually record up to 3,000 tremors of the Earth's core. And it's good that this figure is not known by the overwhelming majority of the residents of the country. So in the subconscious of the older generation who lived through 1948 lives a latent, constant fear. Then, on the night of the 6th of October, an underground jolt of a power of 10 points evened out the city with the ground, and buried under its rubble of buildings and homes each 7th of 10 Ashkhabadians. Grief which befell Neftegorsk is understood by Turkmenistan. When an earthquake on the Kuril Islands occurred, from the Presidential Fund in aid of the victims, $1 million American was dispersed. Planes were dispatched with tents and medications, food. And today, in an urgent manner, such a fund is being formed, which, at least to some degree, will help the Sakhalinians to more easily deal with the tragedy which befell them. This is Spitak, Armenia, December of 1988. Chronicle footage is 6.5 years old, but it seems that this was filmed today on Sakhalin. Everything's so similar. They say there's no such thing as impersonal tragedy, but there's a special sense that in Armenia, which underwent such a terrible plight, so personally and intimately they reacted to the tragedy of the distant island, and mostly in Spitak itself, a city just like Neftegorsk, which in just moments erased from the face of the earth and not yet healed from its numerous wounds. My poor dear Sakhalinians, I am a woman who lost her husband and daughter, and after that I thought that life would not continue. My dear ones, I will only tell you that have patience, and friendship will help us, probably friendship from the heart. Forgive me. I wanted only to let you know that I think you should think only of the children. These people, by their own experience, have evaluated the impact of plight, and they say words are not appropriate. Sakhalin, do you hear the Spitakians? Be brave. Boris Yeltsin is convinced that by the end of 1995, Russia will experience economic and financial stability. He stated this today during his brief business visit through Podmoskovia. Today at 10 o'clock in the morning, a helicopter with the President of Russia, Boris Yeltsin, landed in the Istrinsk area of the Moscow district, where he arrived at the just reconstructed ceramic plant. After the solemn greeting at the plane, the President was to have an unplanned meeting with the local residents and cottagers. Hello. We're not complaining. We must be happy that things are being built this way now, today. Of course we must be happy. They always say that things are good and fine, but ask the men how we live. Our pension is miserable. When will we have a human pension so that we could at least exist on it? We will increase the pension again this year. Somewhere closer to autumn, we will again increase the pension, and will constantly increase. We will constantly increase it. You see that, after all, there have been some advances made in reforms. Of course, not the types which we would want, or you would want, or all Russians would want, but there are certain advances. We feel that by the end of the year, incidentally, industry for the first time in the last 3 years, in the month of May, had a 4% growth in industrial yield. We always had a decline, a constant decline, and now we have a 4% increase in May, and in June there will also be a growth. That is, from this downward curve, we're expecting and emerging upward, not by a steep jump, by a gradual ascent. In other words, we can't say that everything is bad, although we can't say everything is good. It's very difficult, and we understand it's difficult for now. The Dietovsky factory of ceramic plants grew up on the site of a small brick plant built almost 90 years ago. Today, this is the largest and only plant in Russia and the CIS states which produces goods which meet world standards. Made from domestic raw materials, delivered from Ural and Rostov districts, the plant can supply the goods to the capital, the Moscow district, and adjacent region. Boris Nikolaevich, a former construction engineer, demonstrated enormous interest in the facility and proposed the design of 5 such plants. From the point of view of technologies, quality, outward appearance, and durability, and surface, etc., your goods surpass any others. So, good work. But journalists were interested in the most varied problems, specifically forthcoming talks with Ukraine. We will insist on what we agreed on in Masandra and in Dagamys. After all, we agreed and signed documents, and we'll insist on this, 50-50, and that's it. And Sevastopol as a base. That is our principal position. And this time, if they refuse, then that's it. As they say, the money will be handled separately. The President of Russia's visit to the Yakovsky collective farm in suburban Moscow qualitatively differed from voyages of party bosses recently who taught the peasants how to plow and sow correctly. The glowing reports by directors of the farms which raise the best carrots and cabbage in the area, Boris Yeltsin interrupted with sharp questions demonstrating his competence in the agricultural sphere, examining the unique collective farms equipment and mingling with the field laborers. Boris Yeltsin said measures are already being launched so that domestic producers won't experience problems selling their goods, especially since the Russian president said the Russian goods are better than imports, and in this connection tariffs will be introduced and severe restrictions on importing foods from abroad to Moscow. While in Podmoskovia, the president of Russia made several statements on international issues. Responding to the journalist's question, will Russia's position change regarding broadening the North Atlantic bloc after the signing of a document on cooperation with NATO, the president stated, "We agree to join the program Partnership for Peace. But in respect to the broadening of NATO, our position remains unchanged." Touching on events in the Balkans, Boris Yeltsin again underlined that Russia is against a forceful resolution of the conflict in former Yugoslavia. Give them a chance by somewhat lifting some of the sanctions and help Yugoslavia overall in some other way, and the Serbs as well. And this will end there, and then dialogues may begin. In the opinion of the president, dispatching additional UN forces won't solve the problem of the hostages. These 2,000 won't solve anything. Much blood will be spilled, and that's all. We already have a battalion there, and if necessary, of course it can be engaged. But to especially send soldiers to supplement the blue helmets, Russia has no intention. But the president said talks are underway to free the 10 Russian hostages. Boris Yeltsin expressed hope that this will occur in the near future. Russia and NATO have approved today a joint document which provides for the creation of mechanisms of mutual cooperation in the framework of the program Partnership for Peace and specific interrelations between the alliance and Russia as a great European power. In the opinion of the Secretary-General, Vili Klaas, the alliance should be occupied today with the building of a new system of European security, which would facilitate ending the wars in the Balkans and Chechnya, doing everything possible to prevent new armed conflicts. Today, Russia, after a half-year time out, gave its consent to join the program Partnership for Peace. In perspective, according to the NATO scenario, the achievement of political agreement. On his part, Andrei Kozyrev, stating the need to depart from the bloc policy for the sake of a unified Europe and readiness to cooperate, suggested the Russian version for developing the NATO question. First of all, Russia is against the quantitative broadening of the bloc toward the east because it contradicts our geopolitical interests and supports the transformation of the alliance into a political organization with changes in NATO institutions and fundamental documents. Secondly, Russia is prepared for concrete talks with NATO on all issues, but the Russian minister emphasizes all cooperation will be fruitless and harmful for European stability if the alliance preserves the function of a military bloc and structures closed for the majority of countries. Hence, contradictions between Russia and NATO remain, with the mutual desire of the sides to enhance stability on the continent. In the opinion of observers, the North Atlantic bloc is not ready nor interested in any serious reforms and intends to reserve its role of an elitist club. The Muslim artillery today resumed massive artillery and mortar firing of Serb positions and villages near the mountainous region of Ozren in the northeast of Bosnia. There are casualties among the peaceful population. The extreme intensity of combat in Ozren is indicated by the fact that more than 4,000 peaceful Serbs have evacuated their homes. According to the latest reports of the peacekeeping forces of the UN in Bosnia, currently still blockaded by Bosnian Serbs near Sarajevo and Gorazde, are 289 blue helmets, Itartas reports. The troops of the Bosnian Serbs have seized the peacekeepers as prisoners of war after aviation missile and bomb attacks by NATO aviation were launched on the Serbs on the request of the UN mission in Bosnia in the end of last week. According to the newspaper, the New York Times, the American President Bill Clinton had instructed to begin air attacks on the Serbs back in the beginning of the month. Today, when the NATO operation is pervasively viewed as a failure, in America the effectiveness of the foreign policy of their administration is questioned. Our correspondent reports. When on Monday in America Memorial Day was celebrated, the president and ordinary citizens in mournful ceremonies remembered their armed compatriots who died in action. They remembered here individually the life of an American. What can be more precious for an American? Today, it seems the United States is one step from a situation which they attempted to avoid by all means, a landing in Yugoslavia and casualties among their own. A White House representative, Mike McKay, implied that the involvement of naval infantry of the USA in the possible operation to free UN soldiers is not excluded. And how about the lives of Americans? Richard Nixon, during his time, preferred the Vietnamization of his war, deciding to let the Vietnamese fight the Vietnamese. Our own personnel are more valuable. Today's scenario is similar. For the UN forces, as stated by the Defense Secretary Perry, the United States is prepared to supply armored combat vehicles and helicopters, but not personnel. These contradictions are a dilemma for Clinton, but what to do further? The question, who's to blame, is his adversaries already answered. The Senator Jesse Helm already has said the president is useless as a commander-in-chief. Failure in Yugoslavia has consequences for the United States. The idea of isolationism and is it our business is becoming stronger. The cut in the State Department budget and voting in the Congress is scheduled in 1 week, and of course the mood of voters, disappointment in foreign policy, adds to the desire for change. As our special correspondent Alexander Nosovsky stated today at the Semipalatinski polygon near the mountainous ridge of Degelen, the last nuclear system of military designation in Kazakhstan was demolished of a capacity of 0.3 kilotons. The polygon is at a significant distance from transmitting television centers, and therefore we plan to show a report on that event in one of our next information broadcasts. The Crimean Parliament has abolished today its decision regarding a referendum to confirm the constitution of the Autonomous Republic scheduled for the 25th of May. The regular session of the Supreme Soviet of Crimea began with a moment of silence. The deputies honored the memory of the victims of the Sakhalin earthquake. Later, the head of the mission of the OSCE in Ukraine, Andreas Polshutka, spoke. He said that at the round table in Locarno, it was possible to find paths toward mutual understanding between Ukraine and Crimea. Now, participants of the conflict must themselves be ready to make concessions. We can only put up the signposts along that road, said the head of the OSCE mission. The deputies agreed with the proposal of the Supreme Soviet of Ukraine and cancelled the referendum on the Constitution of Crimea. Later, they discussed the draft of a new constitution. Pursuant to that document, Crimea will be included within the structure of Ukraine. The official name of the autonomy will remain the Republic of Crimea. The state languages are Crimean, Tatar, Russian, and Ukrainian. Excluded from the new constitution is the section on the presidential institution of Crimea. The Supreme Soviet, as previously, will appoint a prime minister, ratify the leaders of the central state organs of rule. The deputies can express non-confidence toward the government and suspend it. The draft of the Constitution of Crimea was adopted as a basis. Work on it will be continued. This afternoon in Moscow, the session opened on matters of credit, financial and budget policies. It was chaired by the Prime Minister of Russia. Viktor Chernomyrdin noted that the country needs a clear, lucid financial position of the government. Therefore, it's necessary to define concrete actions for every day and every month. Participating in the meeting were the first Vice Premier, Anatoly Chubais, the Minister of Finances, Vladimir Panskov, the Chairman of the State Commission of the Russian Federation on State Property Management, Sergei Belayev, and leading economists and financiers of the country. They discussed the results of the social economic development of Russia in the first 5 months of the current year, and also the predictions prepared by the Ministries of Finances and Economics of the domestic industrial development of Russia and basic tenets of the draft budget for next year. In the government today, they also summarized certain results of the 5 months of work to support the coal industry. Representatives of the sector and professional unions overall noted stabilization of the situation in the coal-producing regions. The situation has significantly improved with financing. The known salary delays have significantly reduced and overall don't exceed 1 month, which recently seemed to be impossible. The union representatives cited several problems which need immediate resolution. If the government, in a stable manner, fulfills its obligations today, however, consumers are in a situation situation where they receive and demand coal but don't pay. Consumer debts are already approaching 3 trillion rubles. If the debts to the coal sector will continue to grow, it's not difficult to imagine repercussions considering the fact that today coal reserves are beginning to be built up for the coming winter. Arbitrary courts are making decisions in favor of the miners. However, these judicial decisions for now remain on paper. The rate of the American dollar and trading at the Moscow Interbank Currency Exchange today fell by another 5 rubles. By end of the trading session, it was recorded at a level of 4,990 rubles for 1 American dollar. In the lower lands of the Volga, the Operation Fishing Season 95 is underway. Poachers are changing tactics. Previously, nets were cast off further from the city and fish was reaped from 2 p.m. till 4 p.m. in the morning, the hottest time for the thieves. But now, squeezed out by militia on distant fringes, they more frequently operate within the city limits during the day to be lost in the crowd. The staff of the Fish Reserves Protection Department of the Internal Affairs of the Astrakhan district trawl, cut the nets and haul them away, and at times sit for several hours in ambush until the poachers come for their harvest. Such races along the river are almost daily. The poachers, not without basis, rely on their powerful motors and maneuverable boats. At times they manage to escape, but these two were taken into custody and caught with their goods. We have a new Operation Fishing Season, but we haven't received anything new, so that in some way to equip our subdivisions on protecting the fish resources in a contemporary way. But no matter how difficult it may be, no matter how much we complain, we will undertake measures to preserve what should reach the tables of Russian citizens at state prices. Incidentally, prices in the Astrakhan district, for example, for caviar, by resolution of the local administration, are fixed at 140,000 rubles per kilogram. In Moscow, the same kilogram of roe approaches 500,000. Today we received the text of the decree of the President Boris Yeltsin to award Galina Sherkova, the artistic director of the Creative Association Screen of the television company Ostankino, with the order for contributions to the homeland in the 4th degree. In Russia, 69% of the men smoke and 49% of the women younger than 35 years of age. Among the adolescents, half of the males and each 4th female. People quit to smoke when they begin to live well and comfortably. This smoke takes away one's health, one's beauty, and one's youth. But that smoke, as the smoker feels, helps to relax and perhaps make an acquaintance and even lose weight. To ask the question of choice is silly here because each one of us has already made that decision personally to smoke or not, but it wasn't always like that, nor everywhere. For instance, in the ancient times in Arab countries, public smoking was considered to be a crime and could have led to severe punishment and even execution. In Europe, tobacco, as word has it, was introduced by Columbus. Incidentally, the Indians themselves used it in restricted quantities for medical purposes or fighting mosquitoes and during ceremonies. And in Europe, for the first years, tobacco was a means of treatment. Only in the beginning of our century, cigarettes have gained wide acclaim and become fashionable. It was considered that a cigarette in the hand of an attractive woman adds her a unique charm. But the fashion has passed, but the number of smokers has not decreased by much. The answer no to the question, do you smoke, often evokes surprise these days and at times even respect. So, despite everything, non-smoking by the public at large is viewed as one of the virtues of humanity. According to sociological polls, more than 80% of young men wish to meet a non-smoking young lady. The majority of young women attempt to marry a non-smoker. But it's difficult to make these dreams come true because the number of smokers in the world exceeds 1 billion. More than 1 billion people on the face of the planet daily smoke tons of tobacco, causing harm to themselves and those around them. This is a weakness on one hand, and on the other hand, tobacco production is a marvelous means of profiting. Such an incongruity has long plagued the entire world for a long time, but for now, almost without any profitable result. We destroy ourselves more often with negative thoughts and also through bad actions than a passion for tobacco. And now, from the harm of smoking to the benefit of sports, the news of sports life. Continue the program. All the best. On the last day of spring, on Channel 1 Sports News, hello, the event number 1 in the chess life of Russia, the esteemed super tournament, O Master Great Novgorod. Today, the matches of the 5th round, our video dossier we prepared with the aid of our Novgorod TV colleagues and observers of the newspaper Sports Express, Yuri Vasilyev, which we thank them for profoundly. In the center of attention are two matches, Garry Kasparov with Rafael Vaganyan and Vasily Ivanchuk with Jan Elvest. There were curious moments. The Ukrainian player was late for the beginning of his match by 10 minutes. During that time, the world champion in the Association of the Professionals version made several moves which defined the picture of the battle. They played the Furzio Gambito actual version with the Furzio development by C2, and here the most interesting began. Arriving at the chess table, Ivanchuk, without watching, began to repeat Kasparov's moves. The friendly rivals moved neck and neck until the 11th move. Later, their paths parted. Kasparov used a completely new plan and achieved victory at the 24th move, but even previously, Ivanchuk had left the stage, achieving a truce with Elvest at the 14th move, and so Kasparov has gained 14.5 points, and his gap from his pursuers is simply of championship stature. At the courts of Roland Garros, the third game of play of the Open French Tennis Championships, the second tournament of the season from the Grand Slam series. Behind the Swede, Michael Kirstrom, the sensation was caused by Gerbel Scheller, the 300th seed in the world. Currently, the Austrian sent Pete Sampras himself into the audience. And we'll rejoice at the success of our players. Evgeny Kafelnikov beat the Swede Magnus Gustafsson, and Andrei Chesnokov defeated Aaron Krickstein from the United States. In the women's competitions, now advanced are Steffi Graf and Conchita Martinez. The 14-year-old Martina Higgins has pushed out Judith Wisner, who is older than her rival by 15 years. And now our traditional video, Kaleidoscope, in half an hour on the Belgradian Crvena Zvezda Stadium will be the Russian-Yugoslavian team match. This match will define the readiness of our players for the qualifying match with the San Marino team. Unusually interesting was the first semi-final match of the Spanish Cup between Sporting and Deportivo. The guests demonstrated a creative offensive play, achieving victory 2-0. Manjarin opened the score. The second one was by the veteran of Spanish soccer, Salinas. In Bratislava, a reputable company has gathered where the traditional track and field competitions were held. Inga Babkova from Ukraine has won in the high jump competitions in 2 attempts, overcoming a height of 2 meters 3 centimeters. That's the best result of the season in the world. The champion of Europe 1994, Sonia Usareva from the Netherlands, has beat her rival in the 3-kilometer dash, 8 minutes, 45.05 seconds. No one has run so fast during this season. And in this distance for the men, victory celebrated by the little-known star Venustian Gabor from Burundi with the best result of the world season. A lance hurled by the powerful arm of the record holder Jan Shelesny flew 90 meters and 800 centimeters. 7 meters behind was the Russian Sergei Makarov and was in second place. With capacity crowds, matches of the World Rugby Championships in South Africa are underway. The legislator of French fashion, of European fashion, the French beat the team of the Ivory Coast, and the current world champions, the Australians, after a disappointing defeat at the start, won against the Canadians today. 19 years ago, the hockey players of Philadelphia held the Stanley Cup. In the current season, the Flyers, with a super trio, Lindros, Leclerc, Renberg, could overcome New Jersey in the semifinals. Detroit, which has Fyodorov, Kozlov, Fetisov, and Yzerman, is seriously aiming for the most prestigious trophy of professional hockey. The first semifinal match in the series, Detroit-Chicago, will be tomorrow. The finals of the Western Conference of the NBA, visiting Houston, overcame San Antonio. The defense of the host was ripped apart by the pair Elijah Wankosel, who gained 72 points. After 2 straight defeats, the Rockets were set only for victory. This was summarized after the match by its unconditionally best player, Hakeem Olajuwon. Under pouring rain, the 18th rally of the bicycle marathon Giro d'Italia was underway. Victory at the finish was gained by the Italian Dino Sonetto. The pink color of the leader still suits the face of the tournament leader, Rominger, who can only lose by a fluke in their overall count. And that was the sports news on Channel 1. On the way to any summit, falls are unavoidable. By overcoming them, victory is gained. About this, our traditional video accent. Goodbye. Good evening. The first summer day in the north of the European part of Russia will be cool. Here, the influence will be felt of an anticyclone over Greenland. Expected are variably cloudy skies, mostly without precipitation. Torrential rains with thunderstorms are possible in the zone of a lethargic atmospheric front, which has spread from the cyclone over Scandinavia to the South Ural. In Murmansk, Arkhangelsk districts and the Republic of Komi, +6 to 11 degrees. At night, from 0 +3, and some frost is possible. In the Kirov and Perm districts, at night, +3 to 8, during the day, +12 to 17 degrees. In Karelia and the Baltic states in the northwestern area and the central regions of Russia will be there will be the influence of a warm air mass during the day, some brief rains with some isolated thunderstorms, 23 to 28 during the day. In the Baltic states, up to +30. The reason for hot and dry weather on the majority of the European part of Russia and the near broad is a broad lethargic anticyclone. In the near future, its influence will continue to have impact. In the central Chernozem area in the south of Russia, +27 to 32, there will be no rain. In Belarus and Ukraine and Moldova, brief periods of rain with temperatures of 25 to 30 degrees. The same kind of weather is expected on the Black Sea coast of the Krasnodar Rim area. The water in the Black Sea is up to +19 degrees. In St. Petersburg, variably cloudy skies. In the afternoon, some brief rains with thunderstorms. During the day, +26 to 28. In Moscow, it will continue to remain hot. In the end of the day, there will be isolated brief rains with thunderstorms. At night, +15 to 17. During the day, 24 to 26 throughout the district, up to 28 degrees. According to the long-term forecast of meteorologists, June this year in the central belt of Russia should be warmer than usual. This will become especially noticeable in the third weeks. However, the record was defeated in 1931 when the temperatures reached +34.7. June this year will be not only hot but dry. Rains are more likely in the second week of the month. That ends our broadcast. Goodbye.